want to welcome everyone to the webinar today, Prepare Your File Shares for the Cloud by ZL Tech. My name is Raphael and I'll be hosting today. Our speaker is Kaan, Volkan, an expert solutions consultant here at ZL Tech. Before we begin, I want to let everyone know that there will be a recording of the webinar for all attendees that will be emailed to you directly. Also, if you have any questions, you may submit them using Zoom's Q&A button in your Zoom window, and one of our representatives will reach out to you. Thank you again for joining, and I'll let Kaan take it away from here. Thank you.
First off, a quick synopsis of what the feared problem is all about. It's high growth, it's uncontrolled, there's escalating storage costs and administration. Quite often, the complaint is we don't know what's in there, and even if we knew what was in there, we couldn't find it. That causes a lot of issues with regards to governance obligations, compliance, litigation, e-discovery, and as of late, privacy obligations. Now, what do we do about this? The typical response has been to perform files cleanup as an ad hoc project, and then repeat and repeat and repeat. There are a lot of problems with this approach. File shares are known as the corporate dumping ground. So you have a whole mess of documents up there. So you go in and start an ad hoc project to clean up the clutter. But before you finish cleaning up, the next file comes in. You try it again and again and again. Basically, it's a never-ending challenge. This problem is common whether if you're in the cloud or not. Many end up being fed up with the losing battleground. There must be a better way to do this, and there are more systematic approaches. What we need is a holistic process that can be continuously applied, automated, and will keep file shares managed long-term within our overall governance framework. Now, taking control of files is consequently the best first step for taking control of all enterprise data. You start with the simplest one, and that is to start with files management and cleanup. And that's all really you have to do. These are the common functions you need for files management. They also happen to be the same for all the other governance functions. After you got this done, if you're comfortable with it, you can add e-discovery. And here, it's a simplified e-discovery that is reactive. Don't do anything till you get sued. You just have to add more data sources. And then once that's in, quite often you add proactive e-discovery, which allows you to be ready for litigation at any time. After proactive, you can add records, then privacy, and after that, compliance. These three, records, privacy, and compliance, go hand in hand. You need thorough classification for all of them. And of course, in the final stage, you add analytics. We will talk more about analytics at the end. Analytics is a burgeoning space where all of this data under management can be analyzed for insights, not just for risk mitigation, but also to improve the performance of the corporation as a whole. For those of you looking at this, you should know that this data management across multiple functions, such as e-discovery, compliance, privacy, and analytics, the need runs across all vertical sectors. For example, here you have many financials, but also manufacturing, public sector, retail, pharmaceutical, and so forth. It is a common need across all verticals, the management of information across the enterprise. So taking control of files and file shares can lead you to taking control of your enterprise data. The question is, how do we start? We found 3 axes for evaluation to figure out how closely a solution maps to your organization's needs. A lot of users have told us that this is a very useful framework. The first axis is, does the solution cover all the data sources I need? Is it just files? Does it stop at SharePoint? Does it include ECM? Does it include IM and social media, emails, so on and so forth? The second axis is, how deep does the solution process the data? There are layers of processing. You can start and stop at a metadata level. This is useful. However, if you want to implement e-discovery, you need a full text index. If you want to address more complicated use cases, such as subject access requests for privacy, you need pattern recognition. If you want to delete or take any other action, you need to have an established policy across the organization and have remediation actions available. The third axis is how well does it play with the rest of your organization's data management? How comprehensive and integrated are the functionalities? For example, is it only risk mitigation you're focused on? Does it also include compliance, e-discovery, records, or privacy? You'll note that all of these work in tandem. Therefore, it is the culmination of data management. You can't really delete in one and not take care of the others. You can delete under privacy rules, but that may violate compliance rules. That may violate your business records rules, and that may violate a whole bunch of other rules. It has to be done in tandem and orchestrated across management layers. When you map out your data management requirements, you'll find that many of the solutions out there may not answer all of them. We took a sample product from the marketplace. The white spaces are not answered, the blue spaces are answered, and the gray is partially answered. Now, if you're looking for a short-term solution to answer efficiency use cases, this one pictured here will be sufficient. If your needs are more encompassing across the three axes, then you might want to look a bit further. You have to compare your 5 years and 10 years plans and needs against what you see in the marketplace. It's the way most organizations are going. Now, you will eventually have to deploy a system that covers everything on all three of the axes. And that's mainly for two reasons. First, if your solution doesn't cover everything, you create silos. A silo for compliance, a silo for e-discovery, a silo for records, so on and so forth. What's the issue with silos? Well, first, silos cannot control for duplicates. Second, search is inconsistent. Each silo has a different search engine, so the same search command on the same dataset will return different results. Third, each silo has different retention capabilities. The same document in a different silo will have a different life. Fourth, each silo will present its own view of the data. Consequently, there's no single version of the truth and no complete view of the data. With these four sins of the silo, data control is lost. Consequently, the data is not accessible for enterprise-wide usage for e-discovery, compliance, records, privacy, or analytics. So the first issue is, if your system doesn't cover everything, you end up losing control of data. Second issue is the growing number of regulations, especially privacy regulations. If you look into GDPR and CCPA, you will realize that they do not respect silos. They require you to find data no matter where it lies and delete if there isn't a retention period on it. If you fail to comply, you can get penalized up to 4% of your revenue. Just a couple months ago, Amazon got $888 million in penalties. So GDPR and CCPA is coming like tsunami waves, and you need all three of the axes covered to withstand the pressure. Just to quickly summarize, file shares is a dumping ground, silos lead to losing control of enterprise data, and privacy regulations are coming in like a tsunami. So what can we do about it? Well, you start small. You start by cleaning up your file shares, but here's where we part ways. After you clean up the first time, you put it under continuous governance. So, in effect, you're creating a library that makes sure that all of the books are up to date and ready for use. Once you apply governance, you never have to do a cleanup ever again. And if your system addresses everything on the three axes we mentioned, data sources, processing depth, and data management layers, then your data is ready for use in analytics, e-discovery, or compliance. Once managed, Migration of file shares to the cloud also becomes a breeze. These are some of the more common use cases for file analysis. Several of them may apply to your organization. First one, of course, is the point that's front and center of everyone's minds, GDPR and CCPA requirements. Beyond that, we can also use this for examination of insider threats. I think most of the threat management has been focused towards the outside actors, but insider threat is a whole lot more difficult because everyone has got the authorization. And of course, for some of us, mergers and acquisitions and divestitures, there's a need to identify and separate data after the divestiture. That's a legal requirement. With e-discovery, it would be nice to have legal hold for data and file shares and to have the first call in record time. It's also good to equip the legal department with tools to do the searches. Migration is another common use case these days. There's a move towards the cloud. It makes a lot more sense to clean up before you migrate because other ways we would be moving junk data back and forth. This we will talk more about. Lastly, aggressive deletion. This has been a concern more among those who are highly litigated or highly regulated. However, deletion is not as simple as one might think because you don't just say, let's just delete this. The legal department is very sensitive to this type of deletion. It must be defensible, which means it has to adhere to an established policy, and there must be proof that the policy is adhered to. Get in touch with us if you want to discuss any of these use cases further. The workflow for many of these use cases are similar. So we want to go over a real life example first, and then explain how you can use a similar approach to move into the cloud. The customer is one of the top 5 North American banks. Their goal was to manage their files, clean up rot, and do universal records management while complying with privacy regulations as well as FINRA. There was 3 petabytes of data created by over 200,000 users in these file shares. Here's a better way of looking at this use case. We start with 3 petabytes of data, and at the beginning, we have no information about any of it. So we have 3 petabytes of unknown. Our goal going forward is separating this into 2 categories, things to delete and records. Not everything will fall neatly into these 2 categories, but we can deal with what is left later. We want to start big and get a handle on as much data as possible as soon as possible. This is where we utilize metadata, such as last access date, file type, and file location to create large buckets. For example, any video that hasn't been accessed in the last decade is effectively rot and can be tagged as so. Next step in the process is looking at the content of the files. This is where we see companies importing their retention schedules into file management softwares. Similarly, this is where we start tagging PII. Now, each company has a different way of treating PII. For this use case, we will be treating it as rot. We want to move as much of this unknown into our 2 buckets, but sometimes we're left with this middle section where we know it's not rot, but we also know it's not a record. So you can think of this category as to be decided. They still need to be managed proactively for a variety of reasons. They can become a part of a case during litigation. Regulators can ask for them. You might want to do an internal investigation. So we recommend adding a retention policy and some general tags here. We see many of our clients adding a policy like delete if it hasn't been accessed in the last 5 years, or delete 2 years after the employee leaves to manage this part. Quickly referring back to our 3 axes, if your solution covers all of them, then you can start doing some cool things with the leftover unknown to manage it even better. For example, you can run a concept search on this data. Maybe your company loves sharing recipes, but they really shouldn't be taking space in the file shares. So you run a concept search for food recipes and then tag them as rot. The more functionalities you have, the more you can shrink this unknown. You will always have some data left in this middle section, and ongoing governance will help you manage it. Here's another way of looking at the same thing. You identify the data sources you want to work on. These can be file shares, SharePoint, Google Drive. First, you do metadata analysis to get a sense of what we are working with. Second, you do content analysis. You import retention codes, perform searches, identify PII, and a lot more. Third, you classify based on what you learned so far. We recommend doing the precise classification at this stage. The initial two stages still give you an idea about in which pocket the content goes, whether it is delete or records, but this is where you really figure out which subcategory an item belongs to. Finally, we have the remediation stage where our work really pays off. This is where we declare official records, apply in place retention policies, defensively delete or selectively archive if needed. Now that we have our mental map of how the project will go, let's take a look at the ZL solution. So here's ZLFM. As we can see, the main page comes with a number of dashboards. Here we're looking at size category. Here's another way of looking at the size categories on the right. Here we actually choose a size category, namely the huge category. You see a histogram right above the pie charts. If we zoom into it, this is what we will see. It shows the last access date distribution for every huge item. Everything in here is clickable. So if we click to the first rectangle, this is what we get. Here are the actual documents. In here, we can start tagging them. In line with what we talked previously, these are large documents that haven't been accessed. I can easily classify them as rot, so I can add a dispose tag to it. This way, I label it as rot and can easily delete if I decide to do so. Now, I've already taken my first step. I tagged a bit of data as rot. Let's keep iterating. Now, we want to look for records. Let's say I want to focus on IT-related records. I can enter the following rules into my system. Basically, it says tag anything as IT if you see any of these words. I can add more complicated rules here, things like proximity rules, pattern rules, etc. Here are all the tags I have created in my system. I can go forward and add or delete tags. I can also associate an action with each tag. Here we see all the actions that can be associated with tags. Once associated, these actions will be automatically applied to any item that has the given tag. Here's a more manual way of doing the same thing. I can go back to my dashboard, choose the IT category on the right, then declare all of it as a record and choose which kind of record I want it to be. So now here we are. We want to keep on looking. We want to find the PII as well. Here on the right side of the main dashboard, you can see all the different PII tags. If I click on it, this is what I get. All of my PII, then I can tag them with the dispose tag. Now I have tagged all of my records, rot and PII. All that is left is adding a general retention for the rest of the files. Here is the further functionalities we mentioned. FAM allows for quite complicated searches. We don't have enough time to cover them all. But as you can see, you can search by pretty much anything imaginable, including tags, records category, item owner and author, so on and so forth. Using these, you can further slice and dice your data and make sure you minimize the unknown. Now, the long-awaited question. How does this apply for cloud migration? Well, it depends. You can move all of the documents that fall under retention and records category. You can keep the records on-prem because they're high value and just move the retention category. Or you can start by moving the records first if you want to retire your on-prem servers as soon as possible. This way, you have all the high value data you need in the cloud, and you're not super worried about on-prem server downtime. The advantages of taking this methodical approach is that you're only moving what you need, cleaning up what you don't. So your cloud deployment is clean and it doesn't cost as much. Also, once you have the system set up, you can proactively manage your data that is in the cloud. This way, you always have a clean file share. So going back to the client, a top 5 bank in North America with 3 petabytes of data, over 200,000 employees, they wanted to clean up ROT, do records management while complying with FINRA requirements. To begin with, this client couldn't tag, search, and manage their files, leading to an uncontrolled environment. There was a lot of ROT in these file shares, leading to high storage and maintenance costs. Lack of oversight into the file shares led to compliance risk, and disjointed retention policies made it impossible to enact universal records management. With the outlined process above and help of ZL-FAM, the client was able to address all these issues and get full control over their file shares. So I just want to end with this concluding thought. Under information governance, we generally treat data through the risk framework, but I think it's time to treat it as an asset as well, not just a liability. There is some of that going on already, but I think it's about time we catch up with the analytics use cases. For example, this is an image we see quite frequently in our industry. You clearly see the cost to value deficit and cost to risk deficit. There's some mention of value, but it's to highlight the negative. Going forward, especially with analytics, the value aspect should start overtaking the risk aspect. We need to start highlighting the positive value. This is one good demonstration of how we can think about it. For example, if you're actively managing your data, then you can start seeing patterns more clearly. And here are some use cases in which organizations can leverage their unstructured data. They're potentially limitless. We are developing a new technology to address all these use cases. One advantage of the last year is that as companies go remote and adoption of collaboration platforms increase, we have more and more information to tap into for analytics. This communication and collaboration data is significant to analytics because it's created for humans by humans. Behind it, you can uncover a lot of essential insights. One use case, for example, is what to do with remote work. Do we go completely remote, go back into the office, or go for a hybrid method? And the best place to look is communication data. So I think it's time to start getting control of your enterprise data. Get started with your file shares and file. Take control of it across the 3 axes, the data sources, analysis depth, and data management layers. Then move across all the information management requirements step by step. Then you can start adding analytics and start stepping into the future of information governance. With that, I invite you to the future of IG.
Great. Thank you again for sharing that with us today, Kaan. That was very informative. Like I mentioned earlier, there's going to be a recording of today's webinar emailed to you directly. And if you have any further questions or comments about what's been discussed, you can email us at info@zlti.com. Thank you again for watching. Prepare your file shares for the cloud.